So you need to get fully briefed on a really complex regulatory framework, especially one that governs millions of lives. And you just don't have the time to sift through every single paragraph of law. Our mission today is to give you that shortcut. We're taking a deep dive into the Building and Other Construction Workers Act of 1996, the BOCW Act, a massive piece of central Indian legislation. I mean, this law, it governs one of the largest and most critical workforces in the world. It's a really fascinating piece of policy architecture. So, okay, let's unpack this. At its core, what is the BOCW Act actually trying to achieve?
Well, it's an ambitious piece of legislation, really, and that's because it has this dual mandate, which you don't see that often in labor law. The fundamental goal isn't just to, regulate working conditions, things like hours and safety. It's to simultaneously establish and fund a robust, really comprehensive welfare system for construction workers. What's fascinating here is the context. I mean, India has this huge, often transient and historically very informal construction labor force. So this act is the legislature's answer to formalizing that relationship between capital and labor. It essentially shifts the social cost of caring for these workers directly onto the capital cost of development itself.
That immediately signals just how broad its importance is. I mean, this wasn't some minor regulation. It's a central act passed by the Indian Parliament. And to really understand the scale of that ambition, we should probably look at the sheer breadth of activities it covers.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the scope is just enormous. The act governs virtually all building and other construction work. And we're talking way beyond just, the high-rise towers and commercial complexes you see every day. The list in the sources is very explicit. It covers construction, alteration, major repairs, maintenance, and demolition. And the projects themselves, it's not just buildings. It's roads, bridges, dams, airports, and other massive infrastructure projects. So this highlights that pretty much any large-scale physical development project in the country likely falls under this BOCW framework.
Right. So given that immense scope, literally anything from a new highway to a factory expansion, that means millions of workers are potentially covered. But, law is only as good as its enforcement. So what are the nuts and bolts of compliance? Who exactly is legally required to register?
The law sets a very specific threshold for enforcement. An establishment or a contractor, they have to register if they employ 10 or more workers, 10 or more in construction activities at any point during the preceding 12 months. That 10-worker threshold is absolutely critical because it draws a clear line. It effectively exempts the really small, often family-run or micro-enterprises, but it ensures that every medium and large-scale contractor or developer is brought into the regulatory fold. And registration is, it's the necessary first step to accountability.
Okay, and once that threshold is crossed, let's say a developer hires their 10th laborer, how quickly do they have to act? Is there a penalty for, dragging their feet?
Oh, absolutely. There's a strict timeline noted in the source material. Employers must register with the appropriate authority within 60 days of employing that 10th worker. The Act is very clear on this. Failing to register within those 60 days means the establishment is basically operating outside the legal framework. That makes them liable for penalties and could potentially even nullify their contracts.
So the regulation sets the stage. But here's where the BOCW Act really seems to distinguish itself from standard labor codes. A robust welfare system, one that covers health, education, pensions for millions. That's incredibly expensive. And this system doesn't rely on general tax revenue. So how is this massive self-sustaining safety net actually funded?
This is truly the most profound policy insight in the entire framework, the funding mechanism. The Act provides for the creation of specialized welfare boards, and they exist at both the central and the state levels to manage the funds and administer all the benefits. And crucially, these boards are financed through a specific cess that's collected from construction projects. You can think of it as a mandatory industry-funded levy. It's legally distinct from other taxes because its revenue is explicitly earmarked only for worker welfare schemes.
And that percentage is set right there in the regulation. It's typically 1 to 2% of the total construction cost.
1 to 2%, yeah.
Which, it sounds small, but if you consider the trillions of rupees spent annually on infrastructure, that becomes a staggering pool of dedicated capital.
Exactly. It's an institutionalized cost. By mandating this levy, the Act prevents developers from just externalizing the cost of labor welfare. The responsibility for the health, education, and future security of the workforce is integrated directly into the construction company's balance sheet. It's non-negotiable. It makes the whole welfare system self-sustaining and scalable. It just naturally scales up as the national pace of construction and development increases.
That's a fascinating inversion of responsibility,
Yeah.
and it creates this massive dedicated financial pool. But for you, the listener who now understands the funding, the next question is obvious. What do the workers themselves need to do to tap into that fund? So we shift focus now from the employer's obligation to the worker's eligibility.
Right. The worker needs to prove that they are a committed part of the industry. The requirement is that a construction worker must have worked for at least 90 days in the preceding 12 months to be eligible to register with the State Welfare Board. That 90-day stipulation is an administrative checkpoint. It's designed to ensure that the extensive benefits are reserved for those whose primary livelihood really depends on construction work, not just casual or incidental employment. And once they meet that threshold and register, the immediate, tangible benefit is the identity card.
And that card isn't just an ID, it's basically a passport to this whole safety net. So what specific welfare measures does that registration unlock for the worker and their family? Let's spend a minute detailing these benefits because this is the entire point of collecting that cess.
The list is really comprehensive, and it shows the Act's commitment to life security, not just job security. We can categorize them to make it easier to remember, starting with the most immediate needs. So first, you have health and safety support. This covers essential medical expenses, especially those from workplace injuries, and it includes mandatory accident insurance.
And if we look beyond just the immediate worker, the Act provides crucial family support that stabilizes the entire household.
Correct. This includes maternity benefits, which are obviously vital for female workers in the sector. But critically, it also provides education assistance for their children. For you, the listener, this assistance might mean covering school fees, the cost of books, or even uniforms for up to 2 children. This directly addresses one of the major challenges for migrant and low-income labor, making sure their kids don't miss out on schooling.
That is such a powerful social mechanism to integrate into a piece of labor law. And finally, there's the long-term view, the security benefits designed to last well beyond their working careers.
This is the third pillar, long-term security. This is where the BOCW Act delivers retirement security, primarily through pension schemes. And significantly, the Act offers financial assistance specifically for housing, helping construction workers transition from being temporary migrant laborers to homeowners who can establish roots in a community. This whole package, pension, health, housing aid, it's all driven by that 1% to 2% mandatory levy.
It's a policy mechanism that is fundamentally transforming the relationship between development and social responsibility. But all this talk about funding and benefits is, well, it's moot if the working environment itself remains dangerous. We've covered the money and the registration. Now, what does the Act actually mandate for the hour-to-hour safety and dignity of the worker on the site?
The BOCW Act is highly prescriptive when it comes to working conditions. It sets very clear mandatory standards. For instance, the maximum limit for regular working hours is typically capped at 9 hours per day. And it demands non-negotiable overtime compensation and guaranteed weekly holidays. Beyond just the clock, the law explicitly requires providing basic, high-quality amenities on the job site. This is not optional. Safe drinking water, adequate sanitation facilities, functional, well-stocked first aid posts, they must be present. Plus, the employer is legally obligated to provide and ensure the use of all the appropriate protective equipment.
And when we talk about the specific dangers that are just inherent to construction falls, structural collapses, material hazards, what are the specific safety infrastructure requirements employers have to comply with?
These requirements get right into the engineering details of the site. Employers have to ensure proper scaffolding and safety nets are installed. These are the frontline defenses against the most common fatalities in this industry. Furthermore, they must maintain adequate lighting across the whole site and ensure materials are stored properly to prevent instability or combustion hazards.
And maybe the most crucial element in any safety regime, one that is so often overlooked, is just knowledge and training.
Absolutely. The sources emphasize that there must be mandatory safety training for the workers. This isn't a suggestion, it's an explicit legal requirement. Training has to cover how to use protective gear, emergency procedures, and safe operating practices. It effectively makes safety a cultural and systemic requirement, not just some checklist item. This targeted focus on scaffolding, nets, and training really shows the legislation tackling the most severe dangers specific to the construction environment head-on.
So as we bring this deep dive to a close, let's quickly consolidate the key takeaways for you. The BOCW Act is far more than a typical labor regulation. It's a comprehensive framework that achieves 3 key things. First, it defines who has to regulate their work establishments with 10 or more workers. Second, it creates a unique self-sustaining financing mechanism, that 1 to 2% cess. And third, it uses that fund to provide an exhaustive, holistic package of welfare benefits, health, education, housing, and pensions for every registered worker.
And that dual administrative structure of the welfare boards, operating at both the central and state levels, is the engine that executes this vision. It ensures the regulation and the benefits have wide geographical reach and dedicated financial oversight.
The Act fundamentally makes worker welfare an institutionalized, integrated cost of construction. So what does this all mean when we look at policy application?
The powerful final thought is to consider the challenge of translation. The Act gives the construction worker an identity card proof of entitlement to all these impressive benefits. But when that entitlement meets the complex reality of decentralized administration and state bureaucracy, does the political and operational will actually match the initial legal mandate? We know the money is collected, that cess is mandatory. But what mechanisms, what checks and balances ensure that the collected funds translate efficiently and equitably into timely housing assistance or secure pension payouts for the individual worker on the ground?
That operational gap, the difference between the legal mandate and the administrative delivery, that's your next layer of exploration, especially when you look at how effective those central and state welfare boards have been over the past quarter century. Keep digging into the details.